Hey everyone, my name is Holly.
And my name is Allison.
And today we will be discussing Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man and why it is important in today's society.
So this is just a disclaimer that this is for those who have already read the book because we're going to be talking about the main events and things that have happened throughout it.
Ralph Ellison is most famous for this book, Invisible Man. He was in the action of writing other books until they burnt in a house fire.
And we believe that the main motive that Ellison had for writing this book was to talk about the racial injustice and prejudiceness that African Americans have endured throughout history, and today too.
There is an outside source that says in a quote about Mr. Ellison. It is from Saul Bellow. He states, "Mr. Ellison has not adopted a minority tone. If he had done so, he would have failed to establish a true middle of consciousness for everyone."
So what Bello is saying is that if a white person would have wrote this book, it wouldn't have the same effect as if a black person did, because the blacks are the ones who truly endured all the racism and hatred from the white people.
I agree with you, Allison. If a white person had wrote this book, it wouldn't have had as much meaning, and
they didn't feel the same emotions.
Yeah, it just wouldn't have really been as meaningful and heart-wrenching as if a black person would have wrote it. A couple of the other works that we have found by Ralph Ellison includes Shadow and Act and Going to the Territory. These are not considered novels because they are a collection of the essays that he has wrote.
So the common threads we have found throughout these essays are political activism and racism, which are reoccurring themes in Ellison's Invisible Man.
Getting into the novel, the narrator receives a scholarship from a very prestigious black college where he gets expelled his junior year. He then goes to New York in hopes of finding a job, which he does at a paint factory. At a paint factory, he has an explosion and then comes upon a elderly couple being evicted from their home when an organization called the Brotherhood finds him and he joins them. But after a while, he finds out they're very likely betraying him, and that's when he decides to live underground and become invisible, as the title states.
There are many reasons on why the narrator feels that he is invisible. To begin with, he feels that those around him fail to recognize his full humanity. They see him not for who he is, but for who they want him to be. The narrator's intentions are often mistaken throughout the novel because of the stereotypes that others have placed on him. Racism also plays a major role in the misconception of who the narrator truly is. For example, no matter how hard he tries to please the white people, it will just never be enough for them.
Along with what Allison was saying about invisibility, blindness also plays a major role within this novel. The blind people in this novel are the very big ones who also like to stereotype our narrator for who he is not. The blind characters, as you may call them, are the ones who willingly avoid seeing and addressing the truth of something that is right in front of their eyes. The concept of sight and the absence of the sight that is very correlated throughout this book corresponds with the inability to see one's true self and the colors of those beside them and around them. This means that someone doesn't take someone for what they are, but rather for what they perceive them to be and want to be.
Additionally, the only way that blacks are able to receive any sort of power is if the generous whites granted them the power. For example, Mr. Norton built and funded the school and actually was a trustee of the black school and felt that as if his fate depended on the success of the blacks.
Likewise, think of it like this, Allison. Mr. Norton thought that he had power just because he had helped these black people and he had created this prestigious black university. He thought that this had granted him the power of being some successful businessman just because he had done something which, he helped people. He thinks that just helping people is going to give him some God magnified power.
Just like in today's society, if you help somebody, you might feel like you played a major role in their success.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like you can't really help without thinking that people have power over you, as Mr. Norton did, the narrator. Mr. Norton believes that this college and him being one of the founders and trustees, he believes that that gives him power because he thinks that he is the black people's fate. And he takes that in his creative, mind of this college. He thinks that just because he is the, reason for this college and the reason that these black people are going to school, he takes this as it gives him all the power in the world. The narrator greatly admired Bledsoe, who really only cared for his power. Another example is Bledsoe gave the narrator fake recommendation forms to send him away to New York in order of finding a job, but only just so he could keep his power. He even mentioned to the narrator in an office talk visit that he would do anything, and he meant anything, that would keep his power at where he is, and that he had worked a long way to be there.
In correlation with white power, the color of paint at the paint factory symbolizes and represents white supremacy. The paint, known as optic white paint, is mixed with 10 drops of black chemicals, but it only makes the paint become even whiter. This represents that they're trying to cover up black identities with white cultures.
For example, Kimbrough, the white boss man at the paint factory, when he saw the paint that the narrator made, which was gray, he didn't see it as being any other color than optic white, which is the paint that the factory is known for. This goes to show how Americans' realities from white people to black people are extremely different.
Also, the black workers tend to do all of the hard work for the least amount of money, while the white workers, who don't even work as hard as the black people, tend to make the most money from the factory. This still can be relevant today, as pay discrimination is still real in here in some places in parts of the world.
One very important and major quote that is found within the beginning of the novel is "Keep this nigger boy running."
This quote can be interpreted as showing how the narrator is constantly led on, manipulated, and deceived throughout the novel by those surrounding him. They continuously give him a false hope, which does not give him the ability to succeed or have stability in his life.
Because blacks are very highly discriminated throughout this entire book, especially our narrator, this has led him to assimilate to the mannerisms and mechanisms of the white people.
One of the most influential people in this novel that the author was inspired by was Booker T. Washington. Booker T. thought that if blacks were educated, they would win the respect of whites and lead to African Americans being fully accepted as citizens and integrated into all strata of society.
I disagree with this, and don't you, Ellison?
I disagree with this statement.
I disagree with this because blacks to this day aren't fully accepted and treated the way white people are. Now, this goes against what Booker T. Washington said, and this does not go with his presumption that black people will be treated equally as white people.
Now on to objects that represent racism. One of the most racist objects in the book is the Sambo doll. The Sambo doll represents a black lazy slave. Todd Clifton, a black man himself, was even caught on the street selling these dolls. Now this is ironic because it is a black man selling a black doll. Essentially, he is selling himself and betraying his own color. This is also seen towards the beginning of the book when the black people from the college turn on True Blood after he gets his wife and daughter pregnant.
Another object that represents racism that is found in this book is a coin bank. In the book, the coin bank, which is a black man, is subservient to a white man who is giving it rewards, for example, coins of any type. Now, this is relevant in today's society because in this time of Sambo dolls, as they were a racist object, today we have Confederate flags, which are also considered very racist, as they count for the slavery that we have had in the past.
One of the most significant items in this book that has the biggest role is the briefcase that is given to the narrator when he's receiving his scholarship after the Battle Royal.
The items in his briefcase all signify what he has been told to do, how he's been told to act, and all of the times he has been led on.
The narrator even risks his life in a fire to retrieve his briefcase that he left inside. The items in his briefcase also represent the other identities that people place upon him. This only adds to the oppression that people have already placed upon him and also adds to his invisibility.
After burning all of the items in his briefcase, he is no longer tied to his persecutions and he is rid of all the illusions.
Now onto the dangers of ideology. The narrator discovers that the ways of being taught about life are too simple and narrow-minded than the actual reality of the complexity and intricate ways of the mind.
For example, the Brotherhood does nothing but execute and teach ways on how to save and help people, but in reality, all they do is betray them and give them from their freedoms. This is just serving as a form of contradicting, as they teach one thing but do another.
Likewise, the narrator's grandfather speaks on the belief that to demoralize racism, one should be compliant with the whites but only secretly hate them. To elaborate, this means that you should be submissive to whites and generous on the outside and only have hatred secretly on the inside.
Meanwhile, Rags the Exhorter conveys to more violence by telling the black people to rise up and destroy the white people. This serves as a form of racism, as the white people destroy the black people, he is trying to get the black people to destroy the white people. In that sense, they are contradicting their beliefs for wanting their freedom, but in order to do so, they are trying to hurt and destroy and also potentially kill the white people. Now, this contradicting aspect is also seen throughout the story in many elements, but as we just talked about, it was seen with the Brotherhood, as they are wanting their own freedom, but yet they're trying to help others and save other people, but they're only taking their freedoms and hurting them more.
To summarize what we have discussed, Invisible Man was the only fully finished and published novel made by the author Ralph Ellison. Ellison also had two other works titled Shadow and Act and Go Into the Territory that shared similar aspects as in Invisible Man, such as to do with political activism and the subject of racism.
We believe that this extraordinary book shows the raw and unedited part of what living as a black in this time frame could have been and how excruciating it potentially could have gotten. We also believe that this book has so much meaning today and will for the next coming decades and maybe even centuries.
Thank you for watching.
And have a great day.